are trying to work on that process.
So the PPE thing, can we just say that if SEM matches, that a doctor who's never been on site or anything, if they come back and say something about the PPE that was worn, can I just send that to you and say, look, oh, your DMC or CMC is saying PPE?
Well, it's going to be different based on each case. I mean, I can't just take one DMC report and say that he's wrong. I'd be happy to look at the issue overall and see if we can come up with some reports where we're seeing a lot of that and look at the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
How I have defeated that, in that Hanford did really good PR footage where everybody's in tie-back and alternate air and all kinds of 3 layers. And all I say is that the PPE was appropriate for the era that they worked, but not current for today's standard. And that usually defeats that statement. The other question I have is that many times people on the site at Hanford are classified as administrative. And in one particular case, I'm thinking of pulmonary fibrosis, and because the SEM said they were administrative, they were denied because how could they possibly have been exposed to all the chemicals that they were? Now, we had provided the MSDS from their workstation for what was in their work area. The only other document that DOL may not have is a performance appraisal that called them a technical illustrator, which is where they were in the photo lab, is where they were. And that's the only document that I have to prove that PeopleSoft is wrong in calling them an administrator, which is what Hanford, how they lump people. And this is their personal record. It's not one that DOE has. It's from their original contractor.
If you have it, I'd submit it. I mean, they should look at that issue. I mean, if they've been misclassified, and if you have evidence that shows that they've been misclassified, it's absolutely something we should be looking at.
But there's no title of technical illustrators in the STEM.
And it might be something I need to refer to an IH.
Yeah, and that's what I was, when I was going through this, that's what I was saying. You have to understand that SIM is a limited job aid. It's a job tool that has a lot of information, but when we don't find it in SIM, we've got to look for it somewhere else.
And we can go to an IH with something like that. We have IHs that we can refer the case to look at that and see if he can help us find that exposure.
But you need to give the IH a direction to look. So if we were looking at somebody that you had just identified as a secretarial aide, and that's the only information that we have, then that's what they're going to do the assessment on. If there's evidence that this person worked in the photo lab, well, that dramatically changes the whole scale of what might be going on here. Because a photo lab, you're going to have all kinds of chemicals in it.
Well, I went through the hearing, we provided evidence, and we were turned down at the hearing level. So I'm in the appeal process. But at one of our outreach meetings, 2 people came up, and they also have pulmonary fibrosis, and they worked in the photo lab with this person. Could their affidavits that they were also illustrators? Okay.
The other thing, I could just jump in, I mean, and I don't know if we have that, but if there are job categories that are not in SEM and you think we're, site job categories, you could always come to us to try to help find, it sounds like you might have some documentation in that case, but we might be able to find something that, establishes that as a job category. You could submit that, or we could send that over to DOL. They could consider it.
Yeah, we do all kinds of together.
And don't forget that the SIM has a public document submission.
Well, I tried uploading stuff, and it's not very successful. So normally what I do is mail a CD to Paragon and then go from there.
Because they do look at that stuff. And we actually, what I was saying before, we don't get as many submissions as you would think. But, I mean, Paragon does look at all of that stuff, and that's what their function is. For those of you who don't know, Paragon is the one that is our contractor that runs the site exposure matrices. And we do get submissions for new exposures. We do get submissions for new health effects and all that sort of thing. And there are updates that are occurring because of that information. I don't remember the last one. We had one where it was a huge amount of information based on
the job categories probably can work with Paragon.
We'd be glad anyone who has, is looking for. We always try to help find records. We can't always succeed. We'd be glad to help try.
Do you have a question back there?
Yeah. On the issue of causation, when it comes back to the DMCs, and you were talking about training, and you were one of them. It seems that there's a lot of times, I won't say all the time, but a lot of times the reports that come out of the DMCs, the gist of the narrative is all specifically on direct causation of X chemical and Y illness. And then at the end there's some tagline that says, it throws in the causation, aggravated, or contributed to. And it seems to me that those two, aggravated and contributed to, are much less of a burden. And it sort of, in my opinion anyway, was put in there intentionally by the legislators to keep the burden from somebody having to prove direct causation. And if that's the case, then, in my opinion, and I guess I'd like to address it or see what you guys think about whether or not there needs to be more training or more specific direction towards these CMCs or DMCs towards not just causation but contributing or aggravating, because in a layman's head, that's, if it aggravates it, that's like kicking somebody in the shins and not breaking their leg, but it hurt like hell.
Right.
And it seems like it isn't addressed very often.
And I think that's a good point. When we had our DMC process, we would have quarterly conference calls with them and try to talk to them about this. I think it's a difficult one for physicians to put their name on sometimes, to say, I think that this was definitely a contributory factor or aggravated. And there's such a variance. We had one doctor that wanted to put percentages on what would be an aggravating or contributing factor, and you can't do that either because it's a subjective thing. Unfortunately, the definition is rather subjective, and it's going to depend on the doctor. And we are going to try to reinstitute these quarterly calls with them, and I do agree that more training could help with that.
May I make one point? There's a misconception. PPE does not provide 100% protection for you. I speak as an operational health physicist. It provides a protection factor, and that depends upon the type of work you're doing. If you're moving around, we come up with a protection factor, but you are exposed if you have protective clothing, a mask, or anything on. You are exposed. Nothing provides 100% protection.
Okay. Yes.
There's an error in OTIP that we discovered as part of the appeal process of a NIOSH report. The first question is, who do I contact to say, hey, there is a factual error in OTIP? The error is they said prior to 82 at Portsmouth, x-rays were taken off site, and so they gave no credit.
That's
Nice.
too.
Well, I called them, and they said, no, that's not their problem.
And they'll probably end up potentially working with us, but they would probably be the ones to drive the research and we would assist.
Anyway, what you're talking about, the rework, I just got my decision October 24th. The FAB person sent it to your health physicist, who gave a report, yes, this is an new evidence type of thing, and it should be sent back to NIOSH for a rework. But the report, I get this, and it's blacked out who the person is and so forth, and apparently it's a person on your staff. Why do you redact names of people, consultants, and so forth? That certainly is not privacy or anything of that nature, and the claimant has a right to know who's making the decisions.
I don't know
why
where
do you
that
redact
came from.
anything?
We don't normally redact case files like that if they're going to the claimant.
Well, in your next training, perhaps you might suggest to them
I
that they
don't know
don't redact?
why they would do that. It doesn't make any sense.
I've seen that on sometimes when I've asked.
Unless it's a legal opinion.
No, this was from a medical consultant.
It's an
Medical
email.
consultant, and then I got it from the claims examiner, because I wanted the
If it's a
DMC
case
report.
file,
Some
it
have
doesn't
the
matter.
doctor's name crossed off.
Yeah,
Some of them do, and
I
some
don't
don't.
understand that. We'll make sure they understand they
I've
don't.
gotten files where they've redacted my name as the authorized representative, and I'm the one that requested a file.
Okay, I didn't know that it was an issue.
I knew it was my
Give a question, sir.
I don't have a question, I've got two statements. Thank you for making SEM public. And thank you, and thank your claims examiner. You've got some excellent claims examiners
Thank you.
who do
Some
what
are off.
specifically for terminal expedited claims.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Very good about that.
I would like to say I've been working this for quite a long while, and we've had really pretty good service, if you want to put it that way, from your officers and your claims examiners
Well, good, I'm glad to hear that.
and
I know John talks to a lot of people.
John Vance.
He's a good salesman.
Yeah, you really have.
Thank you, I do appreciate
And
it.
can I tell you one thing that I just really adore him?
Sure.
Barry Davidson.
Oh, really? Okay,
Absolutely.
that's good to know. I'll let the
He's my
supervisor know
number two
that.
man. He knows that.
And Tracy Johnson, too.
Oh,
She
yeah.
will take
She does know a lot, she's
Yeah.
very
really
good.
amazing.
Thank you.
The last claims examiner we had at a hearing was so condescending toward our claimant. I was embarrassed for him.
Well, if you want to just send me the name, I'll look into it.
Thank you.
Uh,
Now, let me just take this gentleman had a question, then I will take this.
I understand in the act that the Secretary of Energy is supposed to provide all pertinent and relevant information to get a good finding as far as the exposure of the workers. And with the PPE and the SIMs, what if the Secretary of Energy on a facility, the DOE, knows that the PPE was not provided and in actual working in the complex did not provide the PPE, which the Act already knows because the Act says that certain things went on that were unknown to the people, they were not protected properly. But we're taking the PPE, it seems like, that this was provided to the facilities and that the protective equipment was provided during the duration of the time that the person worked there. And that's the way we're judging claims. I can get more closer to you.